First off, I really want to say thank you for scheduling this. I know we kind of went back and forth, and I apologize for having to change the dates a few times. Got a lot going on, and so I'm just glad to be here. Really excited. I do this class all the time. I've taught it probably 5 times in the last week and a half, pretty much one every day almost. I really believe in what we teach. I believe in the topic, and I think it's really important. So I really applaud you guys for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to allow me to come and do this presentation. So, we're going to talk about a lot of different things tonight, but I like to kind of open it up and say, hey, look, we're here. For me, I want to have fun. I enjoy teaching. I can talk if you want me to talk, but I'd much rather have a two-way conversation. And I want you guys to ask questions and participate, and we'll get out of the training what we put into it. So thanks for being here. I'm Floyd Johnson. I'm the Director of Emergency Management in Campus Safety. I've only been at Auburn, actually, for 2 years. I came here from the University of Michigan, so don't hold that against me. I'm sorry. I know it's the Big Ten. This is SEC country. So, but no, I've worked at University of Michigan, worked at University of Iowa, taught this class at many different places, or a version of this class anyways in many different places. I really believe in the course, and I think it's good material. I also was in the military for 20 years before getting into the higher education world. And I've seen and experienced, active shooter type scenarios in a wide range of perspectives. And so I hope to be able to share some of those with you tonight, and really hope to kind of have an open dialogue on this particular topic. So before we do, I really like to talk about resiliency. I think resiliency is a really important thing. It's something that really sets the stage, I believe, for what we're talking about with active shooter. And so I like to start out just asking the question, what do you think of when you think of the word resiliency? What comes to your mind? And I'm sorry, go ahead. Toughness, I like that. Toughness, yeah. What else? Powering through, okay. All good things, all good things. I personally look at resiliency, and as it pertains to an active shooter, active violence situations, I look at resiliency and I say, hey, it's really this mindset that we know that any given day, we might wake up and some things may not go our way, right? Whether it's an active shooter or we just get in an argument with a friend or we get in a car wreck or a speeding ticket, whatever the case may be, we wake up every day knowing that, hey, there's a potential for something to happen today. It's just a fact of life. It happens. It's there. It's always an opportunity that there's something not going to go our way, right? And so I look at that and I say, really the only way to challenge those things is to be prepared, right? So have a plan, know what circumstances could happen, know what the things are that may cause those bad things to happen. Be aware of your surroundings, know the things that you need to be aware of, but also mitigate the risks that you know are associated with those things, right? So as we're talking about an active shooter, it's really about preparing ourselves, knowing that these things could happen, mitigating the risks that we know are associated with an active shooter, because our goal really, I'm a firm believer, we're not going to ever prevent an active shooter 100%. There's nothing we can do that we'd be able to guarantee you that, hey, if we just do these 4 or 5 things, an active shooter is not going to happen, right? It's always a possibility. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to mitigate the risk we know are associated with it. We're going to have plans to respond when it does happen. And then really at the end of the day, we're going to have this culture where we know that, hey, I woke up today, I knew bad things could happen, but I'm prepared for when it does that I'm going to recover, right? It's about building that mental stability to say, hey, these things can happen, but when they do, I'm going to bounce back. I'm going to power through, right? I'm going to do everything I can so that I can go back and live a normal life, right? Because I think that if you look at the active shooter events that we've seen over the years, there's been a lot of them. We're going to talk about some tonight. But the reality is that, these things, when they happen, they really keep a dark place in a lot of people's minds. And so my goal today really is to get you prepared to not only respond to an active shooter, but really to recover from one as well. When you think about Virginia Tech, that's one that really stayed in the minds of people for a very long time. People talked about it. I worked at the University of Iowa, and they had a shooting there, the gang loose shootings, excuse me. And that was probably years before I got to the university, but I promise you, even like 10 years later, people were still talking about it. People were still, feeling the emotions and the things that were associated with it. And so for me, a part of this class is not just only responding to an emergency or what to do when they happen, but it's really about what we do prior to, what we do during, and what we do after that are really going to set us up for success. So I like to just kind of open up with that, and you're going to hear me talk about resiliency a lot. You're going to hear me talk about preparation, mitigation, response, and recovery. I think these are very relevant terms that to me have a lot of meaning when we talk about this topic. So just a couple housekeeping rules. I know that sometimes, active shooter or active violence can be a very dark and difficult conversation. I've taught this class at some universities and had people say to me, hey, this example you gave, I was actually there. I had students that had been involved in active shooters, lived through them, and really, the training actually triggered a response in them. And so I share that to say that, hey, if at any particular time the things we're talking about are troublesome to you, or you have a difficult time listening or participating, by all means, feel free to step out. It's okay with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I totally get it, and I want to be respectful to the emotions and things that this could potentially trigger for some people, because I know that it's a difficult, or it can be a difficult conversation. So I'm a firm believer we learn by doing. We learn through conversation. We learn by dialogue. I can sit here, like I said, and talk all day. I love talking. I get pretty amped up. I coach a softball team, and if you don't believe that I can get amped up, you just ask the little 8-year-old girls how crazy Coach Floyd really can be, and you'll know, especially when I've had my Diet Mountain Dew, but I've had that and a Bang today. So we are really excited and ready to go. So just keep that in mind, because I do like to get pumped up in some of these classes. And I'm very passionate about it, right, too. So I hope that you can share some of that with me and have dialogue. The class, again, look, we're not here to guarantee you anything. I'm not telling you that if you do these 3 or 4 things, everything's going to be okay, because I can't make that promise. I can't make that guarantee. But what I can tell you is that everything we talk about are options for you to consider, right? There is no right or wrong answer in an active shooter or active violence situation, but there is a job for everybody, and we have to challenge ourselves today. And this is really what I'm hoping to do, is really to challenge your perspective on active shooters, on active violence, right? Challenge what you think you know. And I want you to leave here, hopefully, feeling empowered. I don't want people to take this class and say, oh my gosh, that was scary. Floyd was up here talking about all these really traumatic things, and it really just made me nervous to go about my life. That's not the goal. The goal is to have you leaving feeling empowered and feeling like you have the knowledge to at least take on, some of the tasks that you may face during a very chaotic and difficult situation. So just remember that. There's a job for everybody. So I want to start off just asking a question. What do you think when you think of an active shooter and you think of all the things you've seen on the news and things like that? What are some of the preconceived notions or thoughts or facts that you might think of as they relate to an active shooter? And you can cheat if you want to, but just in general, what do you think of?
Typically like a younger white male.
Yeah, that's a very accurate statement, right? In most cases, and by the way, these are all facts that are from an FBI case study. They do this study every few years, and this is one of the most recent studies that they've done. This was, I believe, from 2021, so yeah, 2017 to 2021. So this is one of the more recent ones that they've done. And these are really just, data points, right? Things that, I come from an intel background in the military. That's what I did for a very long time. And so I actually like to look at data, look at statistics and analyze that to say, hey, what does it mean for me? What does it mean as it pertains to an active shooter incident? I like to see if I can pull out truths and facts and things that help me make the situation make sense, right? I want this data to help me confirm, the thoughts that I might have, confirm the preconceived notions, or show me that, hey, what I thought about an active shooter may not necessarily be the case, right? So that's why I think it's important. But you're absolutely right. When you look at active shooter events, the majority of cases of active shooters, they're males, white males at that. And we're not stereotyping, just pointing it out. And the majority of them are males between the age typically of, really that 19 to 34 age range, right? So really these middle-aged males, that we see. Typically, they act alone. Not very many times have we seen an active shooter where there's multiple gunmen or multiple people trying to do the harm. And again, they're those middle-aged folks. But what I like to look at and what I think was most interesting is the locations. When you think of Auburn University, what do you think of when it pertains to these locations? What category comes to mind? Yeah, education, right? I mean, that's what we're here for, right? I hope. I hope that you're all here to get a degree. I know there's a lot more to experience in college than just a degree. I too went to school, and there are a lot of different things than education. But hopefully that's what we're thinking of, right? But what if I said to you, look, yeah, we're education. Technically, right? We're a government organization, a government, state government, right? We have open spaces on our campus, right? Residence halls, we have those. We have places where people can worship, and really people of all different, beliefs, can go and worship in a variety of places. We have healthcare facilities. And so I say that to say that when we look at active shooters, especially on higher education campuses, we have to look at it and realize that, hey, we're not just looking at when we're in the classroom, right? We're looking at our everyday lives, right? We're looking at when we're walking on Sanford Lawn. We're looking at when we go to a football game at Jordan-Hare Stadium. We're looking at, the classrooms where we're, in these large auditoriums learning, right? Everywhere we go, we have to be aware and cognizant of the fact that an active shooter, an active violence situation, it could really happen anywhere. There is no, real safe place, right? I would like to think there is, but the reality is that these things happen everywhere, and Auburn is very unique in the sense that we really kind of have some of these locations, all across campus. So I think that's an important fact to kind of look at. Active violence in higher education, just kind of give you a couple. Some of these, we could put a list up here that goes on and on and on for days. We could talk about Virginia Tech, we could talk about Columbine, we could talk about, all these different ones, Michigan State that just happened recently, which that one really, hit home for me, having worked at the University of Michigan. A lot of my colleagues that I worked with, I actually saw them on the news during that, and it really just hit home for me, seeing familiar faces and people in such a tragic incident. But when I was at University of Michigan, we had an active shooter scare there that wasn't real, turned out to be a false incident, but it really, sparked a lot of controversy. Not controversy, but there were people that were really nervous, really scared. It created trauma for people, because it was an incident that really had all the clues of it being real and had a full response in a lot of ways. And thank goodness it wasn't. But University of Texas, they had a knife attack on their campus. Ohio State had an attacker that was attacking folks with knives as well. And Umpqua Community College is another one, right? And we could go on and on and on. Michigan State, University of Iowa. But the reality is that we've learned a lot about active shooters. Okay. When I ask most people, what events do you think of, the first thing people say oftentimes is Virginia Tech, right? That's the one that everybody remembers the most in higher ed. But the reality is that as we've experienced all these things, we've seen, and learned so much from all these different, active shooter events that we've seen. But the one thing I didn't mention earlier, and I just to kind of go back to this, is that, I share this slide and we put on here a variety of different incidents, whether it be the bombing at the University of Oklahoma football game. There's a gentleman on a park bench outside the stadium, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is that this training, although we're really talking about active shooters, the reality is that everything we talk about today really applies to active violence, right? So it doesn't have to be a shooter. It can be a person, driving a vehicle through a crowded area. It could be a person with a knife, an axe. It could just be a person who's really agitated with a baseball bat or whatever the case may be, right? You take the aggression, put it in a scenario, and everything we talk about applies, okay? And this doesn't just apply for, while you're here on campus. It applies, when you're out shopping. It applies when you're, going to concerts or, whatever the case may be. All the things we talk about are applicable to those situations. So one thing I like to really touch on to really get things started is this idea of outdated response plans. How many people do we have in here tonight that have taken some sort of active shooter class, maybe in school prior to or anything like that? You have? Okay. So what things do you remember from that training?
I remember being younger and them telling us just to go where there was shelter that
Yeah.
was more protected.
Yeah.
Where there was not really where people could see you through windows.
Right.
And things
Right.
like that. Don't open up the door.
Mm-hmm.
For that. I remember people trying to open up the door in
Yeah.
the training.
Yeah.
And we literally had to not open it up.
Okay. Yeah. So you remember the training, and it was really this idea of hey, find a place that seems like it's better than just being out in the open. Lock the door, hide. A lot of times, people say turn off your phone, silence the ringer, all that stuff. Is that similar to what you remember?
Yeah, I just remember the biggest. I've had a bunch of smaller ones, but the biggest one we had was in elementary school where they
Okay.
had assembly and they taught you what you should do.
Yeah.
And, go hide behind the teacher's desk.
Yeah. So the common theme that I think we've really touched on over the years has really been this idea of, and especially in the K through 12 school system, and I like to kind of preface everything I'm saying by saying that what we're going to talk about today is a little different because we're talking about people that are young adults who are able to do things differently than say a kindergartner, and things like that, right? And so we have to kind of tailor our response plans and how we teach things depending on the age group and who we're talking to. But in most situations, in my opinion, right, we've really learned a lot about active shooter incidents, and the way that we would have responded after Virginia Tech is way different than the way we would respond today. And for a long time, Virginia Tech was the only active shooter event that people talked about. And reality is there's so many different other ones now that we can learn from and experience and have conversations about. But the reality in a lot of ways is that students, prior to us learning all these things, were really being, killed, unfortunately, in their chairs or on the ground with little resistance, right? It was this idea of, hey, lock the door, hide, get under a desk, and really hope for the best, right? Is hoping for the best, does that seem like a strategy to anybody? I feel like if that was my strategy, you're setting yourself up to lose, right? You're never going to win that game when you're just hoping for the best, right? We want to make sure that we're doing things that are smart, that are based on facts, based on the things that we know to be true. And so, for me, the stats really show that, hey, informed people, they tend to react better when they're trained. And so the more that we can understand the dynamics, I believe, of active shooter situation, I think the better off we're going to be prepared. And the reason I say that is because everything we talk about, and you're going to hear me say this 100 times, is that our whole goal in an active shooter or active violence situation is to flip the script, right? Flip the script. So the shooters, they have this idea of what they want to do, what they want to accomplish when they come into a place. Believe it or not, they do, most of the time, right? And so, we have to kind of get ahead of that, right? We have to say, okay, hey, I've analyzed the situation. I know the things that they're hoping to do, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to hopefully flip the script and put myself in a favorable situation, right? And so we're going to talk about how we do that and what I mean by that here in a little bit. But I want to show this video because we do talk a lot about outdated response plans. And the reality is, is that if we just educate ourselves a little bit, I think we'll see that, hey, there are options, right? We don't have to just hide and hope for the best. All right, but I want to watch this video really quick and then kind of talk about your reactions to what you saw. And really, before we even watch these, I want to say that, all the examples we show, I'm not playing Monday morning quarterback. These are very traumatic events, and I am very empathetic to the people that had to experience these things. But I think we can learn from the things that we've seen, and so that's why we show them, not to Monday morning quarterback or try to say all the things that people didn't do. But we'll watch this.
CBS News has now obtained video of the scene inside the nightclub as people hid from the gunman. Here's Jamie Yukas.
This grainy cell phone video captures the horror from inside the women's bathroom as Omar Mateen went on a shooting rampage nearby. It was recorded while more than a dozen people squeezed into one stall, some of them already shot, sharing a glass of water, trying to keep each other calm and quiet so they would not be hurt by the gunman. Miguel Leyva filmed this video.
We had to be quiet because everybody whose phone was ringing and any noise he heard, he was going in that direction and just shooting people and killing them.
They huddled for 3 hours, refusing Mateen's orders to step out.
It was really hot in there. The smell of blood and just dead bodies everywhere.
Outside the building, SWAT commander Captain Mark Canty planned a rescue.
During that entire time period, officers were rescuing people. The entire time we were doing things to try to get people out. We got a lot of people out before that last clearance.
Those trapped in the bathroom had no escape route, and as they desperately texted their families and police, the hostages became the SWAT team's main focus.
In case I didn't think I was gonna make it, I thought I was gonna die. And I figured, you know what, somebody has to know what really happened.
We knew we knew he was in the bathroom. We knew there were other people. We thought there might be some in the bathroom with him. There was some in the bathroom across the hall. But we also were getting information that there were people in other rooms inside the club.
Finally, Canty's team moved in, breaching a wall with a front-end loader. There was a shootout. Mateen was shot dead, and those who were still alive were dragged to safety. Angel Colon had been shot 6 times and was one of the last people to get out.
And one of the ones that helped you.
Today he met his hero, Officer Omar.
So what do you think about that? What thoughts kind of come to your mind when you experience that or when you watch that video? What emotions do you think they felt? Terrifying? Yeah, trapped? I think of like helplessness, right? This idea that like I'm in this room, and I heard him say, we had to be quiet because anybody he saw or heard, he was just, shooting and that kind of thing, right? Like I just think like how terrible of a feeling that had to be, right? And so as I said before, my goal today is to help you create that mindset so that you don't have to feel hopeless, hopeless, and you don't have to feel afraid. You don't have to say, hey, I just have to be quiet or else I'm going to die, right? Because the truth is that's not the reality. That's not the reality. And there's things that we can do. There's things that we can think about in our minds, right, to be prepared and to have a plan and know what our options are, okay? The days of just, hiding in a room and hoping for the best are over, right? And I want that message to be loud and clear. I want you to understand that and to know that, hey, in these situations, I really do have options, right? But it's up to you today to think about that and say, hey, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to do? Because what I'm willing to do may be very different than what you're willing to do. I've heard people, after taking this class say, oh my gosh, I couldn't do some of those things. And the answer to that is that's okay. That's okay, but you have to know what you're willing to do so that when the time comes, you've already made up your mind and you have a plan and you're going to execute that. But some of the things I looked at is again, those outdated response plans, right? It was the idea that hey, I could only just hide in this bathroom and hope for the best. And this was a nightclub, right? And so if you've ever been to a large, nightclub, I'm assuming, this nightclub probably had the capacity of, upwards of 500 people, right? Very large nightclub. I think in this particular incident, there was like 100 and something people that were killed and like over, 50 or so that were injured. So it was a big deal. It was one of the larger active shooter incidents we've seen in a very long time. And so, for me, I look at it and ask myself the question, well, what would have happened? What would have happened if somebody would have just, stood up and ran out the door? You got one person. What would have happened if all 400 of those people would have just all ran, towards the door? Do you think that gunman would have been very successful? Probably not. I mean, would people have been injured? Absolutely. But on the flip side, people are going to be injured if they're just sitting in their seats anyways, right? So we got to set that stage and say, hey, my job is to flip the script, because I don't know how I can necessarily validate this statement or not, but I have heard people say that at Virginia Tech, the gunman actually, prior to the event had put paper plates on the ground at a range and literally just walked by and was shooting at paper plates. Why do you think he did that? What would be the purpose of that? Yeah. He knew people were going to hide, right? So an active shooter, and we're going to talk about this, I mean, their goal, right? The whole purpose of what they're trying to do is they're trying to hurt or harm or kill as many people as they possibly can in the shortest amount of time, all right? And so in their minds, they're saying, hey, I want to come in and I know my victims are going to be laying on the ground, they're going to be easy targets, and if I can hit these paper plates, I'll be able to hit my victims. That's what they want from us, right? So we have to know that, right? We have to understand that and say, hey, what can I do to flip that script, right? What can I do to not be a sitting target, right? What can I do to make it difficult for me to become a victim, right? And so I ask that same question here, and I think to myself, if people would have just, had the opportunity to respond, or I even ask myself, did people tell them that there's other options, right? Other options than just hide in a corner and hope, right? So I want to kind of show you this video here. It's an introduction to Run, Hide, Fight. How many people have taken active shooter course here on campus before this year? You have? Is this a different presentation for you? It's the same? Okay, all right. That's all right, that's all right. We just updated it, maybe last year. And I'm asking that question because we used to teach a course that was called ALICE, okay? And ALICE, it stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. It's a great program. It really was kind of a golden standard for a very long time. And what I've found, and a lot of other people have found over the years, is that, it's kind of difficult, right? In an active shooter situation, if we had one on campus, you're probably going to get an AU alert, okay? And that AU alert's going to say something along the lines of active shooter at whatever building, run, hide, fight, okay? That's going to be your initial message. That's what you're going to hear. That's what you're going to see. And how many of you, if you heard that, would at least have some idea, even if you hadn't participated in this class, would you be able to comprehend what we mean by run, hide, fight? Okay, yeah, I think we would probably at least understand what that means, right? They're very simple words that have meaning that people typically can't understand. Now, if I were to say to you, active shooter on campus at whatever building, Alice, what would your thought process be? I'd be wondering, who the heck is Alice, right? Is this a person? Wait, who's Alice, right? And so, what they've done, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and a whole lot of other people, kind of came together and came up with this new thought process to really simplify our response. I think it's easier for us to teach. I think it makes more sense, and it's just easier to remember, right? I think it's something that we can relate to easier, and so we switched to Run, Hide, Fight, about 6 months ago. And so now we're teaching that. And so this is an updated presentation. But going from the outdated response plans into this new idea of saying, hey, we have options. I think the FBI did a great job, putting this video together. And so I want to show it to you, to really kind of give you an introduction and prime the pumps on what we mean by Run, Hide, Fight. I will warn you, the acting is not necessarily the best. So keep that in mind, but I do think that it's a It's a pretty decent video that really describes run, hide, fight.
Hi, can I get you started with drinks?
Oh, sorry, I gotta take this.
We'll be in a minute.
Hey, you back up! You can't be here and get out of my face, man! I'm in front of you! Get off!
We're gonna make you harder to hit and improve your chances of survival. Don't go up here.
Police, where is he?
By the bar, blue jeans, black shirt. Empty hands up, follow their instructions.
I'm in a direct line of fire if I head for either exit, but I have other options to help me survive. Guys, come on, in here. Go, go, go. Lock and barricade the door.
Both my exits are blocked by the shooter. I gotta stay hidden. I'm no victim. I'm ready for this.
He's applying direct pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding until we can find a tourniquet. In the meantime, turn off your phones and make a plan to defend yourself.
We have to fight to survive. You control the weapon. You control the shooter. I'll go for the gun. He'll go for his arms. The bartender will go for the head. We got him right here!
Please, show me your hands!
Over here!
You can survive a mass shooting if you're prepared. Remember, run, hide, or fight. Run. Wherever you go, be aware of alternate exits. Quickly and cautiously evacuate in a direction away from the attacker. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. Remember windows and emergency exits. Leave belongings behind. Keep your empty hands raised and clearly visible when exiting a building. Follow all instructions from the police. Don't stop until you're sure you've reached a safe location. Hide. If there is no safe escape route, find a good hiding place. Lock and barricade the door. Silence cell phones. Prepare a defense plan. Fight. Fight only as a last resort. Use available objects as improvised weapons. Use teamwork and surprise. A coordinated ambush can incapacitate an attacker. You're fighting for your life. Don't fight fair. Stop the bleed. A victim can die of uncontrolled blood loss in 5 minutes or less. Apply pressure or a tourniquet to control severe bleeding. Go to fbi.gov/survive to learn more.
So how do you feel about that? I mean, I know the acting, like I said, isn't necessarily the best, but what goes through your mind when you see that? Is it self-explanatory? Does it make sense? I mean, if we were to have an event, I mean, would you feel comfortable executing that? Right? Run, hide, fight is really simple. And so I look at it and I say, hey, it doesn't have to happen in that order. A lot of people always ask that, right? They say, well, what if there's a gunman in the hallway? Well, hey, you're probably not going to run directly into fire. I wouldn't advise it, but it doesn't have to happen in that order, right? So I may hide first, right? I may lock down and barricade in the room. If there's a shooter and we knew that it was close by, right? We might say in this particular moment, hey, let's stay where we're at. We think it's the safest place. Let's barricade the room, lock the doors. Pile up as much stuff we can, right? And let's be prepared to fight should the person get in, right? Because remember, again, what's our number one goal? What are we trying to do? We're trying to flip the script, right? So we want to make it hard for that shooter to have us become victims, right? And that's everything that we're trying to do. But the reality is that, look, if it's safe to get away, if you can remove yourself from the situation, do it. Do it. The days, again, of just saying, hey, well, I have to lock myself in this room and hide and sit under a desk, those days are over. Is it scary? Absolutely. 100% it's scary. But the reality is that the quicker I can get myself away from the harm, the better off I'm going to be. I can't be a victim if I'm not in the area anymore, right? So if there's a shooter in this building and I know that they're on a whole different hallway, I can almost guarantee you I'm running out this door and I'm finding an exit on the other side of the building, and I'm going to get away. I'm going to run outside and I'm going to remove myself from the equation altogether, right? I'm not going to stick around and find out, okay? That's just the reality. So if you're able to run away, do so. But in order to do that, we have to know our exits, right? We have to have a plan. We got to be prepared. So when you're in a building or you're in a space, or you're in a classroom, right? When you go into that classroom, and you're probably in the same classrooms every week, right? Over and over, right? It's like repetition, okay? Look around and say, hey, what are my exits, right? Because chances are you probably come in the building the same way every single day, right? I'm guessing. Most people do, right? I typically take the same exact way to work every single day. Same road, I can probably drive with my eyes closed if I really wanted to because I just know the route that well, right? But the reality is that it pays to know alternate routes. It pays to know, if there's a road closure, I can go a different way, right? The same principle applies in an active shooter, active violence situation, right? Know your exits. Know the rooms that you can run to lock down and secure in place if you need to, right? Just know the layout of the building and be aware. But I like to put this up here to kind of talk about it, to say, hey, the survival really starts before the violence begins, right? I think that's really important. We spend a lot of time in these classes talking about, active shooter, and everybody always wants to know, well, what am I supposed to do, right? What's my response supposed to be? I like to ask the question and say, hey, well, what are we doing today? What are we doing, prior to an active shooter event to make sure that these things aren't happening, right? What tools, what things do we have in place on campus to help, again, mitigate that risk, right, that are associated with active violence? And so for me, really, it's about this idea of, hey, again, conducting a vulnerability assessment, right? Know your building, know your space, know your classrooms, right? Know if the classroom you're in has a lock that you can flip the switch and lock the room, the door on, right? Know that ahead of time. Know your exits, right? Have a plan, right? The other thing is AU alerts. How many of you have or receive AU alerts currently today? A lot of people don't. A lot of people, have their phone numbers for their parents' house in there, and that doesn't, good, right? So know how to receive those alerts. How many of you have heard of the Auburn Safety app? How many of you have the Auburn Safety app? It's okay if you don't, all right? On the Auburn Safety app, the reason I put it up here, there's a lot of features on there, but I'm not going to talk about them all because, we're here for active shooter or active violent training. The one that I think is really important is to submit a tip, right? Why is that important? How many times are you on campus and you see something that just doesn't seem right? Has anybody ever had a situation? Right? We get tips all the time. People saying, hey, I was followed home, or hey, I saw someone, when I'm walking home, on the concourse, and it just seems suspicious, right? We want people to report strange and suspicious activities, right? How many times have you heard on the news, in an active violent situation, in the after, the days after the event, people saying, yeah, I guess I noticed that person, really just wasn't like they used to be, right? There's always this idea afterwards where people start to look at things and say, well, I guess I did kind of see the clues, right? And so my question always is, well, how come we're not reporting those things when we see them? We have an opportunity, we have a place for you to submit those tips. You can submit them. They come directly to our office. One of our campus safety administrators who's on call, myself and 2 other folks are the ones who field those. And when we get those tips, we send them directly where they need to be sent, and we handle them as quickly as we possibly can, okay? But you can help prevent these things by just simply reporting strange and suspicious activity. It's that simple. That's something that we can do to be proactive. And so I like to put that out there for people to just be aware of. So the disaster cycle, we talk about it starting today, right? It starts today with the preparation, right? We're here receiving training. That's great. But the mitigation, the threat assessment teams, right? We have a threat assessment team on campus. When you submit a tip, if it's something that warrants being sent to the threat assessment team, we have a group of people on campus who meet, to go over these cases, to talk about things, and to really just be aware, to get law enforcement involved and have, visibility on potential incidents or potential things that could become problems on campus. And a lot of times the threat assessment team is getting their information from people who are reporting strange and suspicious activity, right? So you can be a part of that. Stop the Bleed program. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail, so I'm not going to hit on it now. But having a way to get those AU alerts, the whole see something, say something. I think it's important that we have to know that, hey, look, not all risk can be mitigated. I think that's really important. But when we talk about the response side of things, right, the run, hide, fight, it's super easy. We've kind of talked about it already. You've seen the video. You understand what it means. Now it's really time to conceptualize that and say, hey, how would I apply that in my daily life? How would I apply that when I go to class or when I'm at, downtown at a bar or when I'm out shopping or whatever the case may be? How do I apply those things to all the different things I do in my life? And then finally, this recovery idea, right? It's the idea of being able to kind of, get our lives back to normal and know that, hey, tomorrow's going to be a better day. But let's talk about the police response. What's the average response time? And don't cheat, or cheat if you want to. It's the only time you're going to hear somebody say, hey, you can cheat in a college campus. The average response time is normally about 3 minutes. Is that a long time to you? Or is that good? It's not a trick question. 3 minutes is good, I think, right? 3 minutes is pretty quick. But what's the average, how long does a typical active shooter event normally take? Hours? A minute? Yeah, let's talk about that, yeah.
Well, typically, because once they get there, they have to figure out, what's going on, what's happening, because they're receiving, if it's a big one, they're receiving a bunch of calls from a bunch of different people, hearing multiple versions of the same situation.
Yep.
Before they can come in, they have to figure out what's right and what's wrong, which could take up to hours to actually figure out.
Okay, yeah. I see where you're going there. Why do you say short?
How long would it take for them to kill people?
No. Yeah, no. So it's not a trick question, but the truth is you're both kind of touching on things that I think are really important, right? You say it takes hours, right, for these things to unfold. When we watched that video with the Orlando nightclub shooting, right, what'd you see? You saw a cop sitting outside. It looked like to me, I don't remember all the specific details, but it looked like to me, hey, they were waiting on SWAT to show up. They were trying to get organized, and then they were going to go into the building, right? That's part of the outdated response plan. Okay, I'm not saying that in today's world with law enforcement that, SWAT's not going to show up, because they probably are, they're getting called. But the reality is that we've learned so much that most law enforcement across the nation now, their response to active shooters is, hey, we show up, we get that call. Yeah, there's tons of calls happening. I remember at University of Michigan when they thought it was real, those dispatchers on our campus had got probably over 200 and something calls in less than 3 minutes, okay? That's a lot of information to process. But guess what's happening? Law enforcement now, they're not waiting outside. They're not gathering up, trying to gather the facts. When they get a call for an active shooter, they're going into the building. That's what they're doing. The first person shows up, they're going in, and guess what they're looking for? They're looking for the shooter. They are trying to go in, find the shooter, find the person doing harm, and they're trying to mitigate that as quickly as they possibly can. And so why is that important, right? It's important because of what you said. It's important because the average active shooter, what's their goal? What do we say? What are they trying to do? In the shortest amount of time possible. 3 minutes is not a lot of time, right? If I'm an active shooter, and remember, these people, most active shooters or most, incidents per se, they're typically they start with a grievance, right? So it's a person who, maybe I didn't get a promotion, or maybe, somebody, did me wrong and I'm upset about it and I'm going to get my revenge, right? It always starts with some sort of a grievance, okay? But these people are doing their homework, right? That's what we've learned. These people are doing their homework. They're figuring out, they're saying, hey, the average response time for police is about 3 minutes. So I got to get in that building. I got to do as much harm as I can in the shortest amount of time possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm going to find people who are targets of opportunity, typically, right? Sometimes they may have victims already sought out, but most of the time, targets of opportunity, because they got to get in there and do as much harm as they can in 3 minutes or less. And most of the time, active shooter incidents, they end either by suicide or by law enforcement, right? Or other intervention. What do you think the other intervention is? It's us. It's me and you, right? The other intervention is us, right? Because again, that shooter's coming in, their whole purpose is to come in, do as much as they can in a short amount of time. But when we start throwing, things in there and throwing wrenches into their wheel, right, it starts messing up their process, right? It starts getting them to think, oh my goodness, well maybe I should have went into a different building. Maybe I should have, move on to another classroom because these people are serious and they barricaded in. It's going to be too hard for me to get in, right? I only got 3 minutes, so I'm not going to waste my time trying to get into this room because these people are obviously not going to be easy targets, right? Again, the whole purpose of everything we talk about is for us to understand that all we're really trying to do is flip the script. It sounds so simple, but it's true. But I bring this up for the police response because what's their priority? It's to eliminate the threat. So what are they not doing when they show up? What are they not doing in the immediate, initial entry into the building? They're not providing medical aid, right? People are probably going to be laying on the ground. They're going to be bleeding. They're going to be screaming. They're going to be asking for help. And the folks that show up, again, their job is to find that shooter. So they're stepping over those people in a lot of ways. And it sounds terrible, but the reality is they've got to find that person to eliminate any potential additional victims that hadn't already occurred. And so in a lot of ways, I look at that and I say, hey, that actually makes that makes us first responders, right? And by first responders, I mean, we're the ones having to take care of ourselves in those initial moments. And so when I initially asked the question of, hey, is 3 minutes a long time? You bet it is. You bet it is. When I'm in chaos and I'm dealing with these things and I'm having to provide aid to myself or to my friends, or having to deal with all that, right? That's the reality that we live in. The immediate priority, we've already said, is really not to care for victims. Now, that's going to come. And in a lot of ways, nowadays, a lot of times our fire departments and stuff are trained, with our law enforcement, and they're going to come in sometimes with law enforcement and start providing aid, just depending on the situation. But the reality is that we might find ourselves in a situation where we have to provide aid to ourselves while law enforcement do all the things that they need to do, okay? So what should we do? Keep your hands visible, right? You heard in the video, hands up, hands up, tell them what you've seen, right? So if you're running out of the building, and you see the police, make sure your hands are visible. Why are we doing that? Why is that important? So they know you're not the shooter, and they're trained they look at people's hands, right? They want to know, hey, do you have something in your hands, right? And so we want to make sure we're not, when we're running out of buildings, we don't want to grab everything we have and try to, run out with our book bags and all those things. Leave that stuff behind. But when you're exiting the building, right, hold your hands up. Hey, I've seen the shooter. They're wearing a blue shirt, blah, 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 whatever hallway. Provide those descriptions if you have them. But don't hold or handle weapons, right? You heard in the video, they kind of were sitting in that bar, and they got to a point where they said, hey, if you control the gun, you control the shooter, right? So that's a very valid point. And they were kind of coming up with a game plan. And the idea was you got 3 people, so one of them's going to go for the gun, the other 2 are going to go for one's going to go for the legs and one for the arms, right? We might find ourselves in a place where we have to do that. But at the end of the day, once we get that under control, we don't want to pick that weapon up, hold it, try to be a hero, because then what happens is the law enforcement come in, they see you holding the gun, they think you're the gunman, and now we've had a casualty that should have never happened, right? So that's a really important part that I think is important to make note of. But this last piece is important too, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit of detail. But if you're able, right, provide aid to victims and try to control bleeding. You saw in the video they talked about tourniquets and things like that. Well, we're going to talk about that today. What do you think, in your mind, is the most, what is your biggest threat in an active shooter situation? Some people always are like, what are you talking about? Of course, right? It's getting shot, right? What do you think is your biggest threat? There you go. You're the first person who's ever said that. You're so smart. I bet you got like a 4.0 GPA, don't you? Man, this dude, he is smart. I'm loving that. You're absolutely right. Your biggest threat in an active shooter situation, believe it or not, is bleeding out. I believe that. A lot of people say, oh, their biggest threat is obviously getting shot, right? Is that scary? Absolutely it is. But the truth be told is that the majority of people who perish or become casualties in active shooter situations, the majority of them end up dying from massive hemorrhaging or from bleeding out. They die from treatable gunshot wounds, right? That is really, really a sad statistic to me, but it's true. The White House several years ago kind of came together and started what was called a Stop the Bleed program. I believe the task force kind of got put together after Sandy Hook, right? It was a mass shooting or an active shooter at an elementary school, I believe. And so they came together and said, hey, too many people are dying from bleeding out and trauma. We got to figure out a way to train the public and to teach people how to really prevent that, right? It's very, very simple stuff. How many people are trained in CPR? Anybody? Wow, quite a few. With CPR a hard class to complete, Stop the Bleed's even easier, right? So if you can do CPR and you can get a certificate from the American Heart Association, I promise you, you can get a certificate from the Stop the Bleed program and learn how to prevent, one of the largest, contributors to casualties, with mass hemorrhaging. So the prompt use of a tourniquet, absolutely, to stop the bleed can be life-saving. I've seen it happen. I've applied tourniquets to people, overseas. I've seen people apply tourniquets overseas in combat situations. I've seen tourniquets be used, in my normal day-to-day life as well. And I can tell you that simply applying a tourniquet is a really, really simple and easy way to prevent casualties. How many people have heard or have heard of concerns about, if I put a tourniquet on, I'm going to lose my limb? Anybody ever heard that? Maybe that's something they used to say back in the day, but they used to say, hey, you got to be really careful with your, application of a tourniquet because, if you leave it on too long, right, you may have to amputate your limb. The reality is that, they've done a lot of research on that, and the truth of the matter is that, applying a tourniquet in today's, age with modern medicine, and as quick as you're going to be, at a hospital receiving treatment, it's really not a concern. And the reality, I've seen tourniquets put on people. They've been put on aircrafts and flown halfway across the country with a tourniquet on, and they still have full function of their limb today. So we've actually started a Stop the Bleed program on campus. That's why I brought this here today. These are the kits. You're going to see these in this video, right? And inside of these are 8 individual kits that have tourniquets, gauze, and all the things that you would need to stop the bleed. So I'm sharing that with you to say the majority of these are going to be placed throughout campus, in an AED cabinet or similar to an AED cabinet, next to, the AEDs in your buildings. So you may see these, right? And if you do, become familiar with them, know where they're at, so that when you need them, you can utilize them. And these aren't just for active shooters. Obviously, there's a huge, they're very applicable for that. But they're also applicable for, people who work in labs, get, cut, with a knife or a sharp, razor, whatever the case may be. It applies to that as well. So we're going to watch this video real quick on how to apply one.
Combat Application Tourniquet, or CAT. Two-handed application. In life-threatening situations, the items in this bleeding control kit are designed to provide you with simple yet essential medical equipment to stop severe bleeding. Empower anyone to assist in life-threatening situations. Now you can easily prepare yourself for the unexpected. Lives are depending on it. Gloves should be worn during the application. To begin, remove the CAT from the bleeding control kit. For best results, expose the skin where the wound is located. For this two-handed application, pull the band out of the CAT buckle. Route the band around the limb. Position the CAT 2 to 3 inches above the bleeding site, applied directly to the skin. Pass the red tip through the slit of the buckle. Pull the band tightly and fasten it back on itself all the way around the limb, but not over the rod clips. The band should be tight enough that the tips of 3 fingers cannot slide between the band and the limb. If the tips of 3 fingers slide under the band, retighten and re-secure. Twist the rod until the bleeding has stopped. Secure the rod inside a clip to lock it in place. Check for bleeding and distal pulse. If bleeding is not controlled or distal pulse is present, consider additional tightening or applying a second CAT above and side by side to the first. Reassess. Secure rod and band with time strap. Record time of application on the time strap with the permanent marker included in the kit. Assure the patient that help is on the way.
So that's really as simple. That's really as simple as it is.
One-handed application.
How many people think that after watching that you would be able to apply a tourniquet today? Right? It's pretty simple. This is what it looks like. You can buy these. North American Rescue is a site that I really like. You can buy these individual kits like this as well on North American Rescue. That's where these come from. I actually keep individual ones. I have one in each of my vehicles. Have one at my home in my shop. I keep one in my bag that I have for coaching softball. You never really know when you're going to need it. Okay. I don't carry it because I'm paranoid. I carry it because there's been too many times where I've seen people who are bleeding and they need some help controlling the bleeding. When I was at University of Michigan, there was a young man that skateboarding down a hill, fell off, cracked his head open on the concrete. Was bleeding all over the place. I saw it happen. I had a kit just like this in my book bag. I'm walking to my car. I stop, take it out. I'm able to apply pressure, stop the bleeding before the ambulance even arrives. And when the ambulance arrives, they said, "Oh, wow, you've already stopped the bleeding," right? I don't know if that young man, the bleeding was so much that he was, potentially not going to make it. I don't know. But the reality is that I felt pretty good knowing that, man, just something so simple as having this, I was able to help a person and provincially stop the bleeding. So this is what it is. It's so simple, right? You just take it, put it on, tighten it down, and then guess what? It's as simple as just turning this clip, right? Right? So I'm going to turn this clip a few times, put it in place, and there you go. The tourniquet's on, right? It's so simple. And guess what I can do while I'm wearing this? I can run, right? I have full mobility of my arm. I can still barricade this room down. I can do all the things I need to do to continue trying to survive, after I've controlled, the bleeding and gotten that under control. You can take a look at this if you want to, try to kind of put it on real quick, see how it feels, feel free. That's a practice one that I have, but it's so simple. What I do tell people, though, is that when you apply a tourniquet, sometimes it hurts a lot. I've had tourniquets applied. I've put them on people overseas, and when I've put them on, people have yelled and screamed and said, "Oh my gosh, it's painful, stop, stop, stop." And then I just calmly and politely say, "Hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to keep this on because we're going to save your life." Okay? Really, really simple. Essentially, you're cutting off the blood flow, and it hurts, and your hand will kind of feel like it's throbbing, that kind of thing. But the reality is that it'll save your life. So a really important thing to kind of just be aware of and know how to properly do. But if you don't have access to a tourniquet, what else could you use? You could use a t-shirt, right? Tighten it up real tight. A tie, a variety of things. Those straps for bags that people have, right? Take one of those off, use it. There's a variety of things. As a person who's a certified Stop the Bleed instructor, I have to really say that obviously a tourniquet like that is probably the most preferred. I would recommend using a tourniquet like that. But in a pinch, would I use or would I try to use something else if I didn't have access? Absolutely, right? I'm going to try whatever I can. So again, look, our goals are to survive. We're going to do whatever it takes to accomplish that. Always be aware of the environment around you. Trust your feelings and your instincts. I think this is really, really important. A lot of times people will say things like, "Hey, it's just fireworks," or "I hear, what I'm hearing, it sounds like popcorn," or, "Oh, that's not really a shooter," right? We oftentimes don't want to believe that things are real, okay? We just don't. It's our instinct. And so when we know that these things are happening or we think that they are, right, we have to trust our instincts. But again, we've talked about this already, so I'm not going to, continue to beat a dead horse. But the reality is that their desire is to kill or injure as many people as they can in the shortest amount of time, targets of opportunity, and they're going to continue to move throughout the building until they're stopped by law enforcement, suicide in a lot of cases, which we've mentioned, or that other intervention we've talked about as well. So I share that to say, hey, when we're running through our mind and trying to go through these scenarios in our head of whether we run, right, whether we hide, whether we fight, whatever the case may be, our whole goal, again, is to really disrupt that whole process that they have, right? Let's make it harder for them to have access to us. Again, if I'm able to run away and escape safely, that's my best option. I'm doing that every single time. I'm doing it every single time. If I have to lock down, right, again, the goal when I lock down, the goal when I do that is to barricade myself, make it hard, right? I want them to say, hey, I don't want to waste my time, my 3 minutes that I have, trying to gain access to this person because, they're making it difficult for me to do. So I want to watch this video real quick. This is the shooting that happened in Las Vegas at the concert venue. The individual was in, one of the high-rise, casinos or whatever the case may be. And I just want you to kind of listen to some of the things you hear, so you can kind of see, what kind of chaos was really happening and have an idea of what things could look like. All right, so there's a lot going on there, right? There's a lot going on. But what are your thoughts with that? Oh. Right? There's a lot going on. It's chaos, okay? But what are some of the things you heard him saying? I heard him say, hey, it's fireworks, right? They didn't want to believe that what they thought to be real was real, right? They were trying to convince themselves that it was something else that they knew it wasn't, but their body was saying, hey, the brain is a really powerful, thing, and it's always interesting to kind of see the reaction, I think, that people have, right? I heard people say, hey, we got to go or we're going to be trampled, right? So in an active shooter situation, they weren't just necessarily worried about, hey, the active shooter themselves. I mean, there was obviously a lot of people and in an open space with nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. I actually believe, watching this video, that these people were trying their best to do, the right things, right? They were trying to leave. In the video before the Orlando nightclub shooting, we saw people saying, hey, I had to stay where I was and I was helpless, right? These people were getting up. They were running away. They were trying to disperse, right? I think that's a positive thing. I think that shows, right, that we've learned over the years from these events that have happened. And I think that's really good. But again, it's really about trusting our instincts. It's about knowing what to do and knowing when to run, when to hide, when to fight. In this particular case, running was obviously the best option. These people were running. They were trying to get to at least some sort of, cover, some sort of concealment so that they could kind of get out of harm's way. But in the end of the day, even though there were a lot of victims there, I think, we really saw a lot of positive things in terms of the response to that. But let's say that we were in a situation where we needed to hide, right? In this particular room, how would we barricade this room? What would we do if we needed to today? Yeah, we're going to put chairs up against the doors, right? Can we lock this door from the inside? I don't know, right? It doesn't appear that way. There's no hinges, there's no, way to really lock that door. So, what are we going to do? We can't lock the door necessarily. This door is really kind of unique. We don't see too many of these. But what would we do, right? The whole goal necessarily in this particular case for me is if I'm in this room, again, knowing that that's an issue, we're going to stack as much stuff as we possibly can. We got tables, we got chairs, we got plenty of chairs, right? So the whole goal, right, is to make it difficult for the person to come in. People always ask that question, say, well, what about locking the door? What about all these things? The reality is that, look, there's glass here. There's glass. So do you think that if if a shooter was really that determined that the glass couldn't just be busted and they could come in, right? The reality is that, in a lot of situations, a lot of buildings, a lot of spaces, the rooms that we're in are not always favorable, to locking down, right? We see these pictures and we say, oh, that's great. That's wonderful, right? We're going to try to lock the door. We're going to try to do all those things. But in some cases, you can't. Because guess what? The door is glass, right? Or guess what? It's not really favorable. But in some ways, the whole goal is not necessarily to prevent that person from opening the door, right? It's to make it very difficult for when they do open the door to get in, right? So if a shooter is here, and let's say we were able to lock the door and they come, they shake the handle, they can't get in, right? Do you think they're going to waste too much time trying to get in, or are they going to move on to the next place, right? Because we know, again, how much time do they have? Just a few minutes. Just a few minutes. They're not going to waste their time trying to get into a room that's difficult to get into. They're not going to waste their time when they know that the people who are in that room have obviously taken the time to barricade themselves in. They've taken the time to stack up chairs. And the chance of those people being ready to fight and meet force with force is probably pretty high if they've gone to the lengths to do that, right? So again, our whole purpose when we hide, our whole purpose when we, barricade down is to really put a barrier between us and the shooter, right? Put that barrier, build it, make it hard for them to get in, right? Make them wish or make them think that, hey, this isn't the room that I want to go to because it's too difficult or challenging. And then the fight piece, right? We've got a lot of options, right? We've got chairs, we got camera equipment in the back of the room. Sorry, I know it's probably a really expensive camera, but if I needed to, I'm going to grab that thing and I'm going to smack somebody in the head with it, okay? And I'll consider buying you a new one afterwards. I don't know, right? We got trash cans, we got tables, we got, laptops, right? We got so many things at our disposal, right? And I'm going to use every single one of them, right? I'm going to use every single one of them. We're not going to fight fair, right? We're going to come up with a plan. We're going to say, hey, I need you to grab his legs. I need you to grab his arms. I'll go for the gun, right? We're going to take him to the ground, right? We're going to conceal that. We're going to get that person under control the best we can and deal with it. I'm going to show you this video because I think it really shows, this is one of my favorite videos, it really shows what happens when you meet force with force. And a lot of people say, oh, fighting's never really good, right? Fighting's never, it never works, right? How can I fight somebody when it's how do you bring a fist to a gunfight, right? Well, you're about to see it. I'm about to show you. The reality is that when you act with aggression, these people have a very specific thing in mind, right? Their goal again, right? They're hoping you're going to be a victim. But when you meet force on force, they tend to say, oh, shoot, hey, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't prepared for that, right? So we got to give them the things that they're not prepared for to make it hard for them to make us victims. So we'll watch this video really, really quick, and then we'll wrap it up on this last slide. All right, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, there's a lot going on there, but the same thing. This guy comes in. It was actually shocking to me that he walked from the back of the train all the way to that guy's seat without anybody seeing that, hey, there was a gun. So, right, that goes back to the very first slide of, hey, be aware of your surroundings, right? Pay attention. That's number one. But, this guy comes, and I guarantee you in that particular moment, he thought, hey, I'm gonna rob this guy today. And he walked up, and he put the gun in his face, and what happened? The guy flipped the script. He said, hey, not today. I'm not going to be a victim. Like my wife always tells me, she says, today's not the day and I'm not the one. That's when I really know I'm in trouble with my wife, okay? She says that quite a bit to me, right? And I know, hey, I better back up, right? But that's what happened here, right? He said, hey, today's not the day, I'm not the one. I'm not going to be a victim, right? He met that guy with aggression, took control of the situation, and guess what happened? Everybody else jumped in to help. Right? Active shooter situations are really not any different, right? We might find ourselves in a position where we have to do that very thing, right? But we got to act quick, we got to act with aggression, and we can't fight fair, okay? Those things have to happen. Anybody see the guy, it looked like he was kind of punching him, right? He was actually using his headphone cords, to tie his hands up, is what that was, right? It's really interesting. That lady in the back, she was using those crutches in the beginning of the movie, or the video. And by the end, she didn't need them. I think that's interesting, right? It shows you that, hey, in these moments, your adrenaline kicks in and you can do things that you never thought were possible, okay? But just want to talk about that. Can I get 2 volunteers really quick? And we're going to wrap this up. You want to be a volunteer? All right, only if I can get a shirt. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right, so how about, you know what? You need to be her volunteer. Yeah, I like this idea. All right, so did you play softball or anything as a kid?
Me?
Yeah. You did? What position did you play? Outfield?
I was not
Oh my
good.
gosh. You
I was more of a...
Oh, you were a hitter. Okay, you got skills. All right. So I just want you to play catch, okay? I just want you guys to play catch. Did you play baseball?
No, I'm a football player.
You were a football player, but you got hands.
You think I got hands? Look at me. Come
Oh,
on.
you were like a linebacker. Okay, I get it. Okay, so look. They're playing a simple game of catch, okay? Ooh, I'm not.
Oh, God.
Okay. And
I
don't
know where this is
don't
going.
be scared. Don't be scared. Nothing's happening. All right? All right, so they're playing catch, okay? Well, let me get out of the way. I don't want to get hit with your catch situation, all right? When I do the, okay, that's when, okay? And they know it's coming, right? So when I, okay? So, look, they're playing a game of catch, right? Don't throw it hard. We want to make this easy, okay? So we have this thing, it's called the OODA loop process, okay? I promise you I didn't make that up, right? It's a real thing. It's an acronym that they came up with a long time ago. But the OODA loop is something that I love, okay? The OODA loop was a decision-making tool, believe it or not. The Air Force utilized this to help train fighter pilots back in the day during combat. And so, the idea was that they were trying to train these pilots to be able to disrupt someone's thought process just enough to gain that tactical advantage, okay? So this applies to us in active shooter situations because, again, everything we do is to, disrupt this OODA loop process, right, to give ourselves just enough time to take a tactical advantage, all right? So as they're playing catch, okay, as they're playing catch, okay, as they're playing catch, they're going through this process, right? They're observing the ball, okay? He's not very good at it, but they're observing the ball. They're orienting themselves to it, right? Saying, okay, I'm going to catch this thing. Then they're making a decision that, hey, I'm going to act on this, right? I'm going to catch the ball. And then they're actually acting on that thought process, right? Okay? They were playing catch. You were playing catch. Now let me ask you this. All right, we're good. No more catch. No more catch. You can keep that. You can keep it.
I got nailed in the ear.
All right, so what happened? I mean, you knew it was coming, right? I mean, you knew I was passing out balls. Like you said, hey, I know where this is going, right? Some of you were vicious, right? Purposely, probably aiming at their head, right? They weren't playing fair. I love it. Okay, but look, you were playing catch, and at first, I mean, you guys weren't the greatest catchers, okay? But you were playing, you were catching it. You know where you were going through this process, right? I think you would agree, right? You're trying to do that. We go through this process every day, regardless of what we're doing, whether I'm brushing my teeth, whether I'm, making dinner, doing whatever it is that I do, I'm going through that process, right? But what happened when people threw those things at you? You're playing catch. Like, was it easy to continue playing catch? Did you have to stop? Like, what happened? Huh? Yeah, you stopped, started dodging it, right? Doing this matter, right? What about you? You endured. So you were determined. You were determined. All right. So she was determined. But, I know for me that, when I'm doing these things, it's very, very difficult, right? When I'm doing something, if someone disrupts my thought process, I got to start all over, right? I got to go through this process all over again. And that's really challenging for me. And so the idea in an active shooter situation is that everything we do, whether it be run, whether it's hiding, whether it's fighting, right? Everything we do, we are trying our best to disrupt their thought process. Because the more that we can disrupt this OODA loop process, the more opportunities we have to gain a tactical advantage, okay? And that's really all we're trying to accomplish. And I like to say that because it's really so simple, and this is really a fun way to say that, hey, if you can just disrupt that person's thought process, they're not going to be very successful at what they're trying to do. Do I have anybody in the room that likes to shoot like weapons and things like that? You do? I do too. I mean, I'm a military guy. I love, I collect, weapons, and I like to go to the range, shoot. I like to shoot clays, things like that, okay? I like to shoot a bow too, right? You like shooting bows? You do? Okay, cool. I like that. Yeah. So I like shooting bows, all those things. But, person who shoots a bow, shooting a bow is harder than shooting a firearm, I think. You've never, but you shot a bow. So when you're shooting a bow, how hard is it to go through that motion, right? Is it complicated? Is it easy? Like to hit your target, like to be very accurate, is it hard? You don't know, you just do it? Okay. I'll tell you, for me, when I'm shooting a weapon at the range, it can be a difficult process, right? There's a lot of factors that have to go into shooting accurately, right? I have to be mindful of my breathing, right? If I'm breathing too heavy, right, it causes, to me kind of move up and down, right? If I pull the trigger too hard, left or right, it's going to cause me to shoot off target, right? There's all these different things, my sight picture of how I'm looking at the target through my firearm. all those things have to be in play. And in order to do that, I have to be really proficient. I have to train, right? I have to train all the time and practice. And I can guarantee you that, when I'm trying to do those things, if I have somebody, over here throwing things at me or, running at me or, barricading a room, right? I'm probably not going to be as proficient as I would in a calm, situation, right? In a controlled environment. So the point is that, look, we're not dealing with SEAL Team 6, okay? These people that come in and take out these, high-value targets in the military, right? These shooters are not SEAL Team 6, right? These aren't the trained, guys that are, tactically and proficient and all that kind of stuff. These are people who just want to do harm. They go to a store, they get a weapon, they come in, they're trying to do these things, and it's very, very easy, believe it or not, to disrupt their OODA loop process. It really, really is. And if you come in and you're throwing things, they're going to do exactly what you did. They're going to duck, they're going to dodge, they're going to put their hands up, right? They're probably going to turn around and go somewhere else, and that's the reality. So that's really all we're trying to do. That's the whole purpose of that whole process. Does that make sense? All right. I like that piece. All right, so understanding the risk, this is the last thing we're going to talk about. Really today, my goal, again, was to really challenge your perspective on active shooters. A lot of times people look at these things and think that they're just super scary and impossible, and there really is no good answer of how we should respond and do all those things. And I hope that through the things we've talked about today, that we have taken what was potentially, in your mind, a high-risk situation, and I hope we've reduced that needle to be more in a moderate, medium risk for you. So it is a lot less scary. And I hope that you walk away looking at this and saying, hey, everything I do, I'm trying to mitigate the risk that are associated. I know that these things are scary, but if I just know how to stop the bleed, if I know how to, understand my routes and my areas, my buildings, and have plans and do all those things, that I'm able to lower that overall risk. Because that's really our goal. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to eliminate the possibility of an active shooter, because I don't think that's realistic, but we're trying to train people. We're trying to get people in the mindset of understanding how to lower the risk and be more prepared for when these things do happen. So with that being said, we'll skip that video because it's very similar to the other one that I showed. That's really all we've got today. Look, I really